Thanks for clicking. Stats Canada released Canada's fourth quarter GDP data yesterday, showing a 0% growth rate. The release of the 0% growth rate has led many to argue that the Bank of Canada's policies are having their desired effect, slowing down the Canadian economy. And the slowing of Canada's economy all but cements predictions that the Bank of Canada will maintain its pause at its interest rate announcement next week, as the bank waits to see if a slowing of the economy coincides with a retreat of inflation. With that said, Stats Canada also revealed some concerning signs for the Bank of Canada and Governor Macklem, as the data showed that despite all of the rate hikes, Canadians are continuing to spend.
You're screwing everything up.
So what I want to do today is go over the release of Canada's fourth quarter GDP data, take a look at some concerning signs that are emerging, and then discuss what to look for next. It is the first of the month, so the local real estate board should start releasing their data for the month of February any day now, and we're also awaiting the Bank of Canada's rate decision set to be released next Wednesday. We'll obviously have an update out on both on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this data. Onto the data. Canada's GDP release showed that real GDP, that is our GDP adjusted for inflation, was flat in the fourth quarter of last year, after 5 consecutive quarters of GDP growth. The news of a slowing economy is no doubt going to be welcome news for the Bank of Canada, which, as we've talked about so much in the past, has been actively trying to induce a recession. And within the aggregate data, we can see real signs of a slowdown occurring. Canada's real estate agent and broker activity saw its first decline since 2018, and we also saw a significant decline in mortgage demand as well.
Now you know what it feels like.
Housing investment, meaning construction and renovations, also fell in the fourth quarter, which was the third quarterly decrease on record, with new construction, renovation, and ownership transfer costs all slumping in the fourth quarter of 2022. And it wasn't just real estate. Business investment declined by 5.5% as well, the largest decline since the beginning of the pandemic. So in the fourth quarter of last year, we saw major decreases in demand for real estate, mortgages, and new construction, and we also saw a decline in business investment, all of which will be welcome news for the Bank of Canada. With that said, the data also reinforced what we talked about a few videos ago, that despite all of the rate hikes that we've seen over the past year, Canadians are continuing to spend. Indeed, household spending rose in the fourth quarter of 2022 after declining in the third quarter, with overall spending up 4.8% in 2022 alone. And this is no doubt going to be a major concern for the Bank of Canada, which has been actively trying to get consumers to slow down the spending, actively trying to induce a recession. And of similar concern for the bank is also going to be the growth in wages, which also saw a significant rise in 2022. In fact, overall compensation accelerated in 2022 at a rate of 9.5%, up from the previous year's 9.4%. And if you'll remember, Governor Macklem had actually warned business leaders back in the summer of 2022 not to raise wages, as doing so would make the fight against inflation even more difficult.
Huge move.
According to the data, overall compensation rose to such an extent that household disposable income and savings rates were up in the fourth quarter. And continual spending on the part of Canadians, combined with an increase in wage growth, is really not what the Bank of Canada wants to see, as it tries to prevent a wage price spiral, where the high price of goods leads to higher wage demands, which leads to higher wages, which are passed on to consumers in the form of higher priced goods, and on it goes. So, on the surface, if a recession is what the Bank of Canada is looking for, then the GDP data that was released yesterday is definitely good news, as we're seeing a continual decline in real estate and business investment. However, there are some underlying pressures which are no doubt going to be of major concern to the Bank of Canada, mainly that Canadians are making more money and spending that money. And while the report does note that the elevated savings rate is mostly for those in the higher income brackets, as we've talked about before on this channel, the Bank of Canada has no mechanism for only targeting those higher income earners. When it raises interest rates, when it tries to get Canadians to slow down the spending, it can only really do so through increased costs of borrowing, which do not affect those who do not need to borrow in order to spend. And as such, we could very well see a sticky inflation rate for the remainder of 2023, so long as Canadians continue to spend, and that spending leads to higher wage pressures, which in turn leads to higher spending. We could very well see our inflation rate remain sticky, and the Bank of Canada could have a real problem getting that inflation rate back down to 2% in the short order in which it intends. So, overall good news for a central bank that has been actively trying to induce a recession, as we have started to see our GDP growth rate slow down substantially. With that said, there are some concerning elements within the data as wage pressures continue to grow and as some Canadians continue to spend. Whether or not the Bank of Canada can maintain its pause in the coming months ahead and whether the Canadian economy will continue to slow down remains to be seen. With that said, we'll continue to have updates out on the economy on the Bank of Canada on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, thanks so much for watching.